Before we get into today's episode, I've got some exciting news to share. We are open and welcoming new members into the Natural Super Kids Club. This only happens a few times a year and we're only open for a few days. The club is your one-stop shop for all things kids' health and nutrition, where you get unlimited support from our team of practitioners, as well as resources to make it easy for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Recipes, meal plans, masterclasses, cheat sheets, and so much more. We've made some exciting updates inside the Natural Super Kids Club to make your experience more personalised and easier to navigate. You'll now have access to step-by-step pathways for tackling key health challenges like allergies, eczema, digestion, immunity, fussy eating, mood, sleep, and behaviour. These pathways bring together all the essential masterclasses, cheat sheets, recipes, and supplement recommendations that you will need all in one place. We also have our wellbeing pathways to help you make progress in key areas such as improving your kids' nutrition, reducing their exposure to toxins and chemicals, instilling healthier lifestyle habits, and utilising more natural medicines to support their health. We've added private note-taking, progress tracking so you know exactly where you're up to, and direct naturopath support inside the platform. No Facebook required. With these updates, supporting your child's health has never been easier. Come and check it out and join us at naturalsuperkids.com/NSK for Natural Super Kids -club with a K -open. You'll also find the link in the show notes on our website over at naturalsuperkids.com and on our Instagram as well. We can't wait to welcome you. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the podcast. Jessica Donovan here. I'm so excited to share this conversation today that I had with Ashley Gobeil, who is a child and family therapist. This conversation is going to be helpful for all parents. I got so much out of this conversation, but we're specifically talking today about the unique challenges that come with parenting kids with ADHD. And Ashley shares so many amazing insights and practical tips. And I just want to share a little bit about Ashley before we get into this conversation. So as I said, Ashley's a child and family therapist, trauma-specific counsellor and qualified social worker who specialises in supporting families to work towards the life they most desire, that may be one of peace, more fun, and a happy home environment and family connection, where parents feel proud of the way they are raising their children, knowing they are parenting in ways that develop resilient and beautiful kids who feel good about themselves. I mean, doesn't that sound like the dream? But we have a real conversation. You know, we're not sugarcoating things here. We're talking about how challenging parenting is, how challenging parenting ADHD kids is. And, you know, we talk a lot about the importance of looking after ourselves as parents in our parenting journey. And I really related to this, although my kids are not ADHD kids. I just really resonated with a lot of what she said in terms of some of the challenges that come with parenting in general, but the stage that I'm in, which is parenting teen. So it's a great conversation to listen to, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Ashley. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, Ashley. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about today's chat.
I think it's going to be a really good conversation. So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the type of work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I work with children and families. So a lot of my work in the last few years has really predominantly been with parents, really about supporting parents to deepen their understanding of their children's behaviors. So they often turn up in my therapy room because behaviors are becoming really tricky at home and parents are often distressed, overwhelmed, and it's just gotten to a point where, things are really, really tough. So I do a lot of parent therapeutic support, parent coaching. It's got lots of different names these days, but I am a child and family therapist and a social worker by trade. So I do a lot of work with families to restore or build more harmonious relationships with each other and work towards that goal. I mean, all parents want their kids to be raised as happy, empowered, resilient little kiddos who feel good about themselves, right? And who doesn't want a parent with more ease? So it's usually kind of like the main goal of our work. And I work with families who have children who have been in foster care, who've experienced trauma, all the way up to parents who are struggling with their kids' ADHD-based behaviours, anxiety, prolonged periods of stress, grief, loss, kind of all of that, if that answers the question. So
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm here in Sydney, so I do have my own private practice and then do a lot of stuff online. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes. And I think what you offer is so complementary to what we offer here at Natural Super Kids. And today we're going to be focusing on, I guess the parenting side of ADHD. We've talked about ADHD a lot on this podcast, more from, a health perspective, nutritionally, working on the gut, reducing inflammation, which we were talking a little bit about off air. But I'm so keen to hear your take in terms of, I guess, helping parents with the everyday parenting struggles that come with, parenting in general, but I think it's just heightened with kids with ADHD. So let's start by talking a bit about some of those common behaviours that you typically see in kids that are struggling with their ADHD.
Yeah. So those kind of more common ones, as you said, the common ones we would see can range from, that impulsivity, they've got lack of control. They can kind of be quite interrupty. The parents are like, they're always interrupting. Difficulty listening, following instructions, and then we can see them swing into like hyper focus and finding it really hard to change tasks, transition between doing things. They can become quite easily overwhelmed or dysregulated. So that's where you start to see some of the trickier behaviors like meltdowns and emotional outbursts coming up. Parents also talk about how their kid has this kind of need to like control everything. They'll start to want to control situations and relationships, interactions. And that's often connected to when we have a nervous system that's really dysregulated. The quickest way to establish safety inside of the nervous system is to try to like gain control. So parents will say, oh my gosh, it's like my kid wants to dictate everything that's happening in the home. And some of those other kind of typical ones like forgetfulness, daydreamy, they're unable to focus and concentrate on things for long periods of time, especially when they're not interested in it. They'll just like kind of wander off, it's like they're not interested in it. But if they love it, if they love Lego or they love, whatever they're doing, it's like zone in on the hyperfocus. And you'll see them having that difficulty sleeping, resting, anything like that. Some of those less common behaviors that I see a lot in the ADHD Thrive Institute program that I do some work with is kids seem to find it hard to be bored. I don't know if that's come up in the past, like where it's like they find it hard to actually just be in boredom. And I think some of that is around the dysregulation that's chronically in their nervous system. It's like kind of hard for them to be with that, right? So they always want that kind of either dopamine hit or a distraction. They can get really fixated and stuck on things, like their frustration tolerance can be quite low. And a big one I see across all of my work in the programs is shame-related behaviors for kids who experience ADHD. So they can often have a lot of negative talk. They'll project onto the adults or their siblings where it's like, I hate you, you're stupid. And they try to make everyone around them feel how they likely feel. So I can't remember who found the statistical research, but it's something like they have found that kids with ADHD end up with 20,000 more negative messages than their peers at the
Wow.
age of like 12. So,
God.
they're getting these negative kind of input all the time about, because their behaviors are always being corrected when you think about it at home and at school. So we see a lot of shame show up, and shame is like that. I'll talk more to it as we go, but it's that they feel like they're a bad kid.
Yes, I can imagine they feel like they can't do anything right. And yeah, that negative sort of feedback, yeah, it doesn't help. And so much of what you just said sounds familiar. I've got teenagers. Sounds familiar in the teen parenting, like the struggling to be bored, the needing to have control. So although I'm sure lots of parents that are listening will resonate with so much of what you're talking about, if they do have kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD or have ADHD type behaviors, I think, a lot of it is relevant for even just general parenting, right?
Yeah, because it's like, it's not so much of it is just that emotional dysregulation that kids experience. And kids who experience ADHD often have quite like a more sensitive nervous system. I know Gabor Mate talks about it in a lot of his work around ADD, that, kids who experience ADHD and ADD tend to have a highly sensitive, easily activated nervous system. And what's really interesting is that's where you'll often see ADHD behaviors showing up in different contexts. So some parents will be like, how come they're so really great at school, but they're like losing it at home, or they're really struggling at school, but okay at home? Like it can be the behaviors can show up differently across situations, which can be really confusing for adults and kind of frustrating. But that has to do with like what the relational and emotional input that the child's kind of experiencing, and it affects their ability to kind of regulate in those moments.
Yeah, definitely. So helpful. So obviously there's a lot that parents are dealing with. So where do you recommend that parents start when wanting to help their kids with ADHD, particularly when it comes to that sensitive nervous system, that dysregulation?
Yeah. Well, I think the best place to start, and look, I would imagine a lot of your listeners just are slightly sit outside that mainstream, right? They understand the importance of nutrition. But I always say to parents, I really start with being open to thinking about ADHD slightly different to that really traditional medical mainstream model, right? And expanding their thinking around, okay, what could be contributing? What could be exacerbating these ADHD-based behaviors and symptoms? It's like, what's below the surface? Yeah. So like that kind of curiosity. And even though, there's some research to show there are genetic like markers and components to ADHD, we know that the environment can switch on genes and switch them off, that epigenetic stuff. So, thinking like, what else could be going on for my kid? What's sitting below? And when we can start to be curious around what's underneath behaviors, we can look at, okay, if we address that, can we reduce some of the intensity and the frequency? Yeah.
I love that. So it's not just like, oh, well, they've got ADHD. It's like looking at them more as an individual and what's going on for them in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some of those factors, I often say to parents, okay, start with thinking about everything from, which you would do a lot in your program, is inflammation. What's the toxin exposure? What's the diet? What's the gut health look like? What's their inflammation level? Because we know that inflammation, which also can come from stress, if families are really stressed, right? Inflammation will keep that nervous system at a really sensitive level. So become quite easy to become activated. Um, everything from like lack of time in nature and low physical activity, excess, too much screen time, all of that can exacerbate ADHD as well. Our classroom cultures can often exacerbate ADHD. Is it, what bits are working for kids and what isn't? Things like unresolved lived experiences. So, we know our nervous systems hold like the imprints and in our blueprint of our whole lived experiences, our whole lives. So things like grief and loss, divorce, trauma, attachment disruptions, social exclusion, the list goes on. That stuff can sit with kiddos who experience ADHD who are more sensitive. And so they, again, can contribute to that more sensitive nervous system over time if those experiences really haven't kind of been don't know if resolve is the right word, but integrated in a way. And they've made sense of their emotions around them. And the beliefs that their child carries about themselves. So that shame is a huge exacerbator that sits underneath behaviors. When that child feels like, oh my gosh, I might fail. I'm going to get it. Yeah, I'm getting it wrong. I'm always in trouble. Maybe I am the bad kid. When that even gets a little bit touched upon, we can see kids fly into like fits of rage, blaming someone else or lying, that sort of thing. I had a parent this morning actually said her little one was doing a test at school and handed it into the teacher, and he's got ADHD. And the teacher looked at it and it was blank. And she just said, oh, kiddo, did you find it really hard to concentrate on this today? I know that sometimes your brain makes it really tricky. And he just started to well up, and he was just like, I couldn't do it, And her response was beautiful, but that's not often the response sometimes.
I can imagine, yeah. It's like a different teacher would have had a completely different response, which would have led to that sort of cycle of shame, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And for him, it was just like he actually feared he was just going to get it wrong and he was stupid. So he was like, I'm not going to try. Right. So again, that can even like contribute to like that difficulty concentrating and that executive functioning lag. And I'm not sure parents who are listening, if there's a really cool statistic around executive functioning. So you might have a kiddo, let's say, who's 11, who has ADHD. That might be their chronological age, but their executive functioning age and their emotional developmental age, they reckon is about 30% lower than their peers, like on average, right? So you might have an 11-year-old, but they're sitting around 9, or you might have a 9-year-old who's sitting around 6. And so it's like adjusting those expectations. Which
I was just going to say that really helps parents and teachers, hopefully, and carers, really adjust those expectations, which can be a positive thing for that cycle of shame.
Yeah. Absolutely. So like when they feel better about who they are and just don't feel like they're being corrected as much, then they can start to move through some of that shame. Parents often go, really? Like they're that much younger? So it's like even those little kindy ones who are 5 and 6. I said to a parent the other day, I'm like, that emotionally development, she's probably sitting around 4. And they were like, oh, that makes sense with the meltdowns. I'm like, because there's been a bit of a lag in that development, or when things have been really chronically stressful in homes. There's kind of like unfinished developmental tasks, let's say. Yeah, those kiddos.
So if a parent's listening that are like, light bulbs going on, oh my gosh, like I'm maybe contributing to that shame that my child feels, but I guess not knowing how to get out of that cycle, like feeling like the child does need to be corrected, they can't behave in that way or whatever it might be. Like any tips on that?
The first one is like, give yourself some grace, parents. Like it is hard. Like I work with parents who literally show up who are just completely overwhelmed at tears. Like it is so tough. Like every day, I had a mama a couple of weeks ago say like every single interaction feels like a battle. I can't get him to do anything, so it's like what you're up against is really tough. So I do want to acknowledge that to parents that it is. And I would say to parents, acknowledge what their experience has been like as well. Sometimes there's some grief in it. Like parents, it's not the reality you want to be in. It might not be the timeline you want to be in. And you might be grieving like that. Oh, this is not what I thought parenting would be, especially if it's been like prolonged stress in the family. It's like, it's really, really tough. And so have a lot of compassion for yourself, but also we aren't going to get it right all the time. We're not going to be perfect as parents. And so when we show up in a way and then we go, oh, I've unintentionally shamed my kid, or, oh my gosh, I've corrected them like 50 times. You can go back and do repair. Like that's the beauty of it. You go back and you do repair and it's like, you know what? I flipped my lid earlier. I was really frustrated and I completely yelled at you. Actually, it probably would have made you feel not very good about yourself. I still really need you to pack your school bag. It's like we could still hold those firm boundaries and limits and still hold space for our children's emotional experience of that boundary and limit, because kids do, especially kids with ADHD, they need a lot of scaffolding on those skills. Yeah, does it make sense? I think Dr. Becky talks about, people know her, kids are born with all the feelings and none of the skills,
Mm,
right? So
such
it's
a
like,
good way to look at it. Yeah.
yeah, they're born like little emotional things, but none of the skills. So we have to scaffold those skills. And kids with ADHD often need a lot of prompts and a lot of reminders. Yeah, and some big firm boundaries and limits.
Which is exhausting for parents, like parents that are already, feeling like they're just keeping their head above water in their busy sort of lives. So yeah, I love that you acknowledge that, it's tough for parents, and we don't want it to become shame for us, although I'm sure, it is for a lot of parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think so. Actually had a parent actually in our coaching call this morning who just was like, I feel so judged, or, oh my gosh, I feel like I can't get anything right. Maybe I'm not getting it right. Have I, and I think as many of us as mums often have that moment of like, have I ruined my child? Oh my gosh, I've done it. It's like, pause. You are doing the best you can with the resource and the knowledge that you have. Yeah. Like we are doing the best we can with the knowledge and resource we have. And if we could be doing better, we would be. Um, I think, yeah. And it's like when you can, you'll get there, right? Just like listening to some of this stuff, even if a few things land on a parent today and go, okay, I'm going to be mindful of that moving into my parenting. That's just part of your process. Because again, it's like if you could turn a light switch on and not have that parental frustration, we would, right? Like how many of us be like, oh, I wish I didn't have motherhood rage today. Well, it's there. So how do we just be with it with a little bit of kindness and do repair when we need, right? Because it is really exhausting. And it can actually it can burn out a parent's nervous system. Like parents who are parenting neurodiversity that's really exacerbated ADHD, they do tend to be the parents who go into compassion fatigue and burnout or stay in that like hyperarousal flight state ourselves as parents, right? And those chronic fight modes or just crash and burn because it is really tricky. So yeah, I was like, how do we get there? So like self-care is a huge thing, which I know is
Yeah. Keeping your own, like filling up your own cup as a parent. That's definitely my motto for these teen years, which are tricky in a different way. But, like if you're going to be able to cope with whatever the kids throw at you in any particular day, I think the most important thing is to keep your own, self-care practices up and keep your own cup full.
yeah, because it's like if we're empty, how can we turn up to our kids' struggles in the way that we need? And this often can happen. It can be like a bit of a dynamic that happens is that we end up kind of with low resource. And so when things are stressful, we kind of unconsciously want our kids to turn up in the way that helps us. We want compliance. Like how much easier would compliance be? You didn't have to sit and convince your toddler to put on shoes, right? Like we want our kids to turn up to the space like that just makes it easier for us. Then other times it's like, oh, actually, okay, I've got to turn up to their struggles in a way that's going to be helpful. It's that kind of longer route of parenting. Right? It's like the true emotional regulation. Because I often say to parents, yes, compliance would be great. But compliance doesn't build true emotional regulation for kids. It actually just teaches them they need to do what adults say. Yeah, like it's an interesting conversation to think about, have.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's something that we wish for as parents. Like, why don't they just do what I say? But I love that you said that. It's not really building any helpful skills for our kids if they're just doing what we say.
Yeah. It's like we really truly want them to develop that emotional regulation, which then has the flow on effect to them having self-discipline. They will become more cooperative. They'll learn taking turns. Like it's like they'll get there, but they need that emotional regulation development first. And all the research shows that emotional regulation development initially comes from co-regulation. Children need to have consistent, repetitive experiences of adults co-regulating them, meaning they kind of like essentially have to borrow our nervous system for quite some time.
And that's just another vote for why we need to make sure we're as, as regulated as possible, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. So interesting. So tell us a bit more about the parenting framework that you see that works best for kids with ADHD.
Yeah, I feel like we've, kind of gone a little bit. So how do we tie this all together? So
Yeah.
I guess I call it an ADHD specific parenting approach. And some people might get the sense already, it's a little bit of a flavor. There is some conscious based parenting in it. I kind of like to think about it as having three parts. And that first one is the parenting mindset. Okay. So our mindset going into parenting a kid with ADHD is huge, which is kind of what I spoke to around getting real with where they're at in their executive functioning, kind of thinking about what could be behind their behaviors, etc. And one of the best kind of little mantras that seem to land well for parents who've got kids with ADHD is Dr. Ross Greene's work. He wrote The Explosive Child, and he talks about kids do well when they can. It's if we could really truly start to step into that as a belief, kids do well when they can, as opposed to kids do well if they want to. Because when we are in that parenting belief that, kids do well only if they choose to, as opposed to actually kids do well when they can. And if they're not doing well, it's usually because something's getting in the way.
That's a massive mindset shift.
Huge. And it can be a really tricky one because we were all parented, most of us, from the framework. And society has conditioned us to go, no, kids do well if they wanna. So let's just make them want to do better. Let's do punishment. Let's do consequences. Let's do, so when we actually go, no, they've got a sensitive nervous system. It's highly activated. They've got some neurodiversity. The way they experience the world differently. Lots of kids with ADHD, because of that sensitive nervous system, they do tend to have more food sensitivities, allergies, the gut health difficulties. They're sensitive to sensory experiences. So their whole body, mind, just, physicality just experiences the world more sensitively, if that's a word, differently. And so when we can really go, my kid's not giving me a hard time. They're actually having a hard time. This isn't about us as parents. It's not you, right? And it's really tough not to take it personally as a parent. It's no, actually, there's something getting in the way, and this is what they're showing up as. I do truly believe that all children's behaviors are a form of communication. Yeah. So having the mindset, if I go back to that three kind of pillars to the ADHD specific parenting is we got to have the right mindset. And then it is really a relationally and emotionally responsive approach. So it really focuses on connection and understanding whilst holding limits, very sturdy limits and boundaries, as opposed to really focusing on that traditional based parenting of compliance, punishment, because we know that exacerbates shame, etc. And that real, scaffolding of skills. So it's you got your mindset and it's okay, we respond from more of an emotionally, responsive approach. So I don't know if you've heard of it, just that connection before correction.
Yes, I was thinking about that before when you were saying, that cycle that we can get in, always correcting. And I've recently been in that with my 17-year-old son, and I've got to catch myself and be okay, how can I connect with him before I correct him again?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's connect to their emotion, connect to their in relationship, and then correct, or instead of correct sometimes, right?
And sometimes the connection does the correction, right?
Exactly. Sometimes it's enough to do that regulating, because we are actually the biggest tool that our children have, well, even into adolescence, because as I said, they need to borrow our nervous system for such a long period of time to build those neural pathways in their brain and bodies for their regulation. So they plug into us. They can drain us emotionally. I had a mom once say to me, It's like she's a little emotional vampire. She just comes in, totally drains me, and then she's like good and regulated, but I'm flat on the floor. It's like,
Yeah, I'm sure lots of parents can resonate with that feeling. Like, hang on, what happened? I'm feeling so flat now.
yeah, like take everything from me. So yeah, it is that, and it is, yeah. So it's a really relational, responsive kind of parenting approach. It's the mindset shift and holistic. So as I said, it really looks at what are the other factors that are sitting, parenting is huge, but also looking at, okay, how else can I reduce that intensity and frequency of the symptoms through the natural kind of, health, everything from, there's great, results around like chiropractic stuff for kids with ADHD and cranial sacral therapy and kinesiology. And, if people looking into that more alternative, complementary type of approaches as well.
Yeah, so much that, complementary health, natural health can offer in terms like to support kids with ADHD. And that's what we're sort of always harping on about. And, like for a good example of that, like if so additives, food additives can be very triggering for a lot of kids with ADHD. So if your kid's diet is full of additives, no matter what sort of parenting approach you're taking, that you're coming in with, like it's going to be tricky. So I love that you brought in that sort of, that holistic side of diet and it comes back to basics a lot of the time. It's a good whole food diet, it's movement, it's good sleep, it's not too much screen time. All of those things can add up to make a huge difference, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, like they'll, so many of the kids I see is like, they're completely riddled with inflammation. And as you said, it's like parents have to go, your parenting approach isn't working. I'm like, define working.
Yeah.
It's not making them calm down. It's not making them stop. I'm like, have we done the other piece of the puzzle? And it's like, I still want to encourage parents that if it's not shifting right away, keep showing up in these parenting approaches because it does reduce that shame that they're experiencing over time. It's going to strengthen your relationship, because it's like, what's the alternative? They're struggling. And if we come in with more distress, and that even unintentional shame, that it's like, okay, even when you do the food bit, it's hard to explain. So like, how do you do them in parallel at times? Yeah, because it's like, keep showing up. This is the long route of parenting. The agenda isn't to use empathy or naming their emotion to calm down. It's like, often say, have you tried naming, try naming their emotion? Like, oh my gosh, you're really, really angry now that I've turned off the TV and you really want that screen time. Yeah, I know. It's like so unfair that I've said no, still can't let you have that ice cream before dinner, but you're really, really sad. And the kid's having this big explosive meltdown. And it's like, your parenting approach didn't work. I'm like, it's about holding space for the meltdown so that your child has the experience of feeling seen, heard, and acknowledged, no matter how they show up. And eventually with consistency, they're like, oh, my parent does kind of get it. And it does start to like I said, that frequency and intensity will reduce.
Yeah.
Even with just the parenting, but gosh, you add the holistic stuff in and it's like you're doing all the pieces of the
It
puzzle.
all comes together. Yeah. And I love that you said that because, I think a lot of parents can have unrealistic expectations. I know I certainly have in the past where you like learn this amazing parenting strategy like that reflecting the emotion they're feeling. And in the moment you can feel like, well, it's not working. So yeah, it's not about working. Like it's not that quick fix, is it? It, like you said, it's about holding space. It might not be working, but they are still feeling heard and validated in that moment. And then over time, that definitely works. And it's funny now that I've got, cheeky teenagers and I try and reflect back emotions to them, they'll be like, I know what you're doing.
I know. I know. I've got lots of clients who the kids will say to the parents, why are you sounding like Ashley right now? And we kind of crack. Like, this is a good thing because it's like, even when they're onto you, it's like they know you're showing up different. So it's like we're shifting the dynamic. We're doing something different. Yeah. And like empathy and emotion coaching, it's not meant to be used as a tool to get your kid to comply. That it's meant to be a tool to leave your child feeling seen, heard, and acknowledged so that they develop more resilience over time and build, that positive sense of self. Identify eventually then the kid I love, like when parents come back a month later or so and they're like, oh, my kid just said they were sad. I'm like, great, that's progress. They said they were sad, still may have had a bit of a meltdown. They said they were sad. Like, that's huge.
That's massive.
Where they stomped
Yeah.
their foot and said, I'm angry. Amazing. You know,
Yeah.
it's like slow progress, but it's like when you're undoing, or you're not undoing, when you're building that emotional regulation, it can take time for kids who are sensitive and where there's already been some, unhelpful patterns that have happened for them. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's not like a thing that you sort of get, you like, right, I've nailed that. And now everything's calm forever in my home. Like, emotions still happen. It's just about how we can support our kids to regulate them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like acknowledging our own emotions as well as parents, because certain behaviors are going to trigger us more than other behaviors.
Yes.
Which could be a whole nother podcast around why, like our own stuff that shows up. But I often say to parents, okay, what bit's your stuff that's showing up? It's like, oh, yeah. And giving yourself that kind of grace and acknowledging, oh, yeah, this is really tough in the moment. But it's not an emergency. I can do this. I can ride the wave of emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just something I've been practicing again recently is sort of pausing before I respond, because I'm definitely finding, the teenage behavior, like through these teenage years, a lot of triggering, and just being aware that, okay, this is triggering for me, like, and just pausing before you like sort of respond. It's
Before we
huge.
react. Absolutely.
Yes.
We'll end up reacting from that place of dysregulation in ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to going, okay, this is my nervous system recognizing something is not safe. Might not even have to do with my kid. Could be a past nervous system imprint from my own childhood. Or, I'm feeling, whatever's happening for you, pause and then going, okay, how does my kid need me to turn up to this right now? What's going to be helpful? And it's like, we want to give kids the message, especially in teenagers as well, that we've got this. We can be the sturdy anchor when they're wobbling. It's like, how do we stay sturdy when they're wobbling? Because if we start to wobble too, they don't get the the experience of relational safety that they need to develop that regulation. Yeah. And we can leave them feeling really seen, heard, and valued. Like, I would say that's like the main thing we really want to do for our kids in those interactions. Like, how do I leave them feeling really seen, heard, and acknowledged for all parts of them?
Yes, so true. I love that. I'm getting lots of great reminders and tips for myself. And I don't even have kids with ADHD, so I think this is so helpful. Like I said earlier, like for parenting in general, I think parents that are parenting kids with ADHD are just sort of that next level. Than what the rest of us might sort of experience. But yeah, super helpful. I'm sure the listeners that have kids with ADHD are finding it really helpful as well. So can we just go back to executive functioning? I know you talked about that earlier. Can you explain what that is for people who might not know, and share some practical strategies for executive functioning?
Yeah. So definitely got a few little tips and strategies. In terms of how to explain it, it's kind of explain where there can be a little bit of a lag in parts of the thinking brain. So when you think about children and adults, but children's brains, we've got we've got our thinking brain, then we have our emotion brain, and we've got our brainstem. So brainstem and survival brain is where we see the fight, flight, freeze. And we have our emotion brain where you'll see lots of different emotions. Thinking brain is where it's called the cortex for those who love the neuroscience, the prefrontal cortex. But it's really in charge of like everything from language to problem solving, decision making, concentration, focus, etc. Regulation can impact regulation as well. Depending on the right side and left side of the brain can get kind of cool. But to think about, but it's really, kids with ADHD can struggle accessing parts of the thinking brain quickly. It's almost like sometimes I say to parents, like, can be like patchy Wi-Fi. Yeah. The teenagers are trying to get Wi-Fi on the phone. It's like in and out. It's like, they want to kind of get to that, but it can be really tricky. So it can impact like working memory, you'll see. Like, so children with ADHD can often really only hold like 2 instructions at a time. Yeah. So they'll often need a lot of prompts. They might need you to actually really go to them and go, hey, I need you to do this now, rather than hollering it from across the house. There can be something really helpful around having like a clean, decluttered space that doesn't feel chaotic, and a designated area for important things, because they can be quite forgetful. It's like, hey, can you go and do this? and do this. That might be all they can manage. Yeah. And yeah, that kind of easily distracted as well if they're not interested in it. Even like recall can be a bit tricky at times. So we want to be really clear in our expectations. Rhythms and like little rituals can be really helpful throughout the day. So like we talk a lot about routines, super great, but rituals and rhythms, like having little rituals where it's like before dinner, we light a candle as a family or put on our favorite song. Or in the morning after everyone's ready, we do mindful coloring, like almost like markers throughout the day that feel meaningful, that kind of keep them knowing that there's an ebb and flow. So it helps them feel kind of contained, grounded. We want to like also turn down stimulation in the house where we can. They might need a lot of visual things like a visual calendar, images, as opposed to lots and lots of words, right? A visual routine. A lot of kids with ADHD also have that comorbidity around like dyslexia and dyscalculia as well. I'm dyslexia, so I'm like, how do I put that in? Which often gets missed. So yeah, that sometimes reading and all the numbers and words will jump out. They need a lot of physical movement, wind down breaks, that can really help kind of reset those parts of the brain. And they do love that kind of creative side. I mean, most kids do creative bit, dance, music, cooking, that kind of free, natural play. Team sports, martial arts-based skills have also really shown that kind of help, that kind of increase and boost those executive functioning skills. Yeah. And a reduction, and I know it's really tricky, low levels of screen time. Because screen time can really, really impact kids with ADHD, keeps them in the dopamine loops. And the younger the child is as well, it can actually bring on the left side of the brain too quickly, and or the way it scaffolds up. So
such a challenging one, because I think it's probably like a bit of a like it helps in the moment, right? Like
absolutely. When you're burnt out and stressed as a parent, parenting a kid with ADHD, sometimes the only break you feel like you get is when the kid's on the screen. Yeah. That's a tricky one. It's like getting out of those kind of habits, because it's like sometimes, then they're dysregulated for the rest of the afternoon. But getting them outside in nature as much as possible, on the trampoline. And depending on age, like some of the tips and tools, and there's so much stuff online around how to help kids with executive functioning as well. It's like you might choose, what's the age of my kid? What's going to land? Some kids are like, parents have big, beautiful whiteboards with all these different images, and they're like, they just forget to look at the whiteboard every morning. Like, all right, that's not working. Okay, get creative again. It's like, what's going to work for my kiddo? Yeah.
Yes, it's different for every child. And when you're talking about that physical activity, gosh, I've seen time and time again in the clients and members that we work with, like more physical activity, more outside time in nature makes such a huge difference, especially like before school, if kids are struggling to sit and concentrate and, which obviously is expected at school, like if they can get some physical activity in before school, that can just change, have a massive positive impact.
Huge. And time for like mindfulness and practicing mindfulness. Because remember I was saying they find it really hard to be bored, or they find it hard to be still sometimes. It's like you might have to do it with them before they're able to do it as well. And like even opportunities to increase their experiential learning, like using hands and visual and touch, as opposed to the sitting and learning and listening, right? Like what are the other opportunities for learning? Kids with ADHD need that more
sort of hands-on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately we know mainstream school doesn't fully nurture for our kiddos.
Yeah. But again, it's like, I guess, where possible, making good choices in terms of, schooling and that sort of thing. That's obviously a whole another topic. But thank you for sharing more about executive functioning and how we can kind of support that in ADHD kids. So what about some, like we talked about the regulation, like the dysregulation. I think this is huge for kids with ADHD. So parents, like some tips for parents to increase kids' self-regulation, and I guess reduce those tricky behaviors.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about connection before correction. That can be such a good one. So it's like, connecting with them and just saying their emotion, as I described her, it's like, yeah, you're really, really angry right now. You're mad at me because I've done that. So like sharing their emotions out loud. Again, giving them that message that we can stay sturdy when they're, wobbling. And it's also naming their emotions, but finding in ourselves to have that like genuine empathy and compassion for how they feel when we can muster it up. And yeah, some days we're going to need to write it out. Like sometimes it's like we're writing the emotional meltdown and the outburst. And working on our own triggers and our own parental nervous system, I would say is like probably the most important thing when we want to support kids with ADHD to build regulation. And it actually fascinates me every time you're like, when we can actually get it together a little bit, when we can look after ourselves, when we can get the support we need and show up different, it has such a ripple effect. Yeah, I think the other really big one is how do you hold, a lot of parents go, how do I hold those sturdy boundaries and limits? Yeah. And still hold space for their emotional experience. I think that's like a really big one.
It's a tricky balance to get right, isn't it?
We don't always want to, we're naming all the emotions. If it's like, but how do we also then like invite accountability and to teach our kids what, most of them know what's okay and not okay. But it's like, I think Dr. Becky again talks about it around how do we stay in that parental authority, but with kindness. It's like we want to step into constantly our parental power. So, because often a lot of parents say with kids with ADHD that the child is dictating the atmosphere of the home, that they're in charge, they're running the show. I hear those messages over and over again. It's like, okay, how do we step back up into, no, actually, we're the ones in charge. Yeah. And it's as simple as going, I can't let you hit your sister. I'm not able to let you have ice cream for dinner. I actually can't let you speak to me that way. You're so angry, you're screaming in my face and you're swearing. It's like I'm not able to let you do that. So I'm going to have to come and take what you're about to throw out of your hands. So it's like, I can't let you scream in your sister's face. So now I'm going to step right in between you. I'm going to help you with this really big feeling. Yeah. I had a mum earlier this week that was like, he was kicking and screaming and having a really unsafe meltdown. It's like, it's riding the wave of like, it's my job to keep you safe. So I'm going to stay right near you. I'm going to help hold your feet down because I'm noticing we're finding it really hard to be safe, noticing what's coming up for you as a parent. And it's like, I need to come in and help you pause your body because you're about to hurt someone. If it's like at that level. Yeah, which for a lot of families, it can escalate where kids are in that fight mode pretty regularly. Or as I said, they're showing up in what parents experience as defiant, where it's like another part. Yeah, and I was gonna say I might just finish holding the limits and boundaries, and then you add on to that, hey, I can't let you do that. I won't let you do that. You just add on, but I know you feel really angry about it. It's okay. I need to feel sad about it. You can be mad at me right now. Yep. It's like, acknowledging that they have an emotional experience about the limit you just set.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do both at the same time.
Absolutely. So you're like holding that and yeah. I think where else I was going with that. Yeah.
Well, I think that in itself is super helpful. And I think it's really tricky to get right. And I just love what you said before about, just acknowledging that this is tough for parents. So yeah, although you've shared lots of, great tips and strategies and information, it comes back to like, I guess, acknowledging that this is tough for parents. It's tough for the kids as well. And yeah, I guess, making sure that we're looking after ourselves first and foremost. I love that point you made about the co-regulation of the nervous system. I think that is super important for people to understand.
Yeah. And as adults, like we're kind of like the heart of the family nervous system. Most of the time, yeah, it's the mamas. Like we're like the beating heart of the whole family nervous system. Like we have the impact. And then sometimes when you have a kiddo who's really struggling, it can kind of dysregulate. You know how like nervous system energy and emotions are so contagious. And so we can become so whipped up and in the dysregulation that all of a sudden we're living a life where it's like everybody's reactive.
Mm-hmm. And it can feel like a heavy responsibility for mums and dads as well.
Yeah, huge. And so it's like, okay, how do we get into the new mindset? How do we use the empathy and curiosity? And it's like, what's really going on for my kid? Yeah. We can even use curiosity in the moment with kids where it's like, like, I wonder if you're screaming and yelling at your sister because you actually feel really bad about yourself right now. Like, we can acknowledge the shame, right? And lots of empathy. Kids with ADHD who are struggling, or any kids who are struggling, yeah, they really need us to kind of be like, hey, I'm trying to get a glimmer into what life is like for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this is why the work you do is so important, supporting parents and kids. So tell us more about the work you do and where we can find you. And I think you've got a freebie or two
Yeah,
for our listeners as well.
I do. I have a few freebies. So, yeah, people can find me on Instagram, Ashley Child Therapies on Instagram, as well as some of my work's on the ADHD Thrive Institute. And I do have a resource that's like 5 powerful exercises to motivate and soothe your kid with ADHD. So I do a lot of like somatic-based work, sensory and body work with kiddos that can help regulate their nervous system. Another great parenting tip. And so that's a handout that gives you, and there's actually more than 5 exercises I've put in there. There's like 20. Around, what can uplift and regulate kids, motivate them, and what can soothe them. And I've got another one on helping kids build a positive self-esteem and reduce that shame over time. So there's a little self-esteem tip sheet that I can give you as well, just to share.
So helpful. And I will make sure that we share the links to those resources as well as your Instagram accounts in the show notes. So for everyone listening, head on over to our show notes. The links will be in there. For you to follow along with Ashley's work. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.